Beginning. The heat in Phoenix doesn't break. Even at 3 a.m., the asphalt radiates like a dying star. I was curled in the back seat of my sedan, sweating through my shirt, when the flashlight beam shattered the darkness. Tap, tap, tap. I rolled down the window, already calculating the cost of a trespassing ticket. I handed the officer my license with a practiced apology. But when he ran the numbers, the air inside the patrol car shifted. I saw his spine stiffen, his hand drifted to his holster. He walked back to me, not as a cop, but as a soldier. "Ma'am. Step out of the vehicle. Keep your hands visible. There is a federal flag on your file from 1998. Homeland Security has been looking for you for 27 years. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." They drove me to the federal building in downtown Phoenix. The transition was violent. 1 minute I was baking in the desert night, the air thick enough to chew, and the next I was shivering in a windowless room that felt like a meat locker. The air conditioning hummed with a mechanical aggression that seeped right into my bones. My sweat dried cold on my skin. I sat at a stainless steel table, hugging my own arms, waiting for the interrogation. I expected handcuffs. I expected accusations of vagrancy or fraud. Instead, the door opened, and a man in a charcoal suit walked in. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a decade. He introduced himself as Agent James. He didn't sit down. He just stood there, staring at me with an intensity that made me want to crawl under the table. But it wasn't anger in his eyes. It was recognition. He looked at me like I was a ghost he'd been chasing for half his career. He placed a single file folder on the table. He asked me what I remembered about 1998. I told him I was 10 years old. I told him it was the year my Uncle Michael died in a car accident on the highway. Agent James shook his head slowly. "It wasn't an accident, Daphne. It was a car bomb." The words hung in the freezing air. My brain tried to reject them, but the forensic accountant in me, the part of my mind that lived for patterns and discrepancies, latched onto the statement. Michael didn't just die, he was murdered. James explained that Michael had uncovered a massive leak in the defense contracts our family firm managed. He was going to the authorities. He never made it. Then James slid a photograph across the metal table. It was grainy. Black and white. Taken from a surveillance camera 27 years ago. It showed a parking garage. In the center of the frame was a woman handing a thick envelope to a man whose face was obscured by shadow. I knew the woman's posture. I knew the way she held her purse. I knew the sharp angle of her jaw. It was my mother, Patricia. James spoke quietly. "Your mother didn't just work there, Daphne. She was the courier. She handed off the classified schematics that got your uncle killed. We lost the trail after the explosion. We lost the witness. We've been waiting for you to surface. You aren't a suspect, Daphne. You are the missing piece of a 27-year-old puzzle." I stared at the photo of my mother. For years, I thought she treated me with cold indifference because I was a disappointment. Because I wasn't polished enough or smart enough. I was wrong. She didn't hate me because I was a failure. She hated me because I was dangerous. Agent James asked me the question that had been haunting me for 6 months. How does a senior forensic accountant end up sleeping in a Honda Civic in 110-degree heat? I looked at the steel table. I didn't want to tell him. It felt like admitting to a crime I didn't commit. But the truth was the only currency I had left. It started in March. I was the lead auditor at my family's firm. We handled high net worth portfolios. Sensitive data. The kind of money that requires silence. I was good at my job because I understood that numbers don't lie, people lie. Numbers just wait to be found. And I found them. A discrepancy in the operational accounts. $450,000 siphoned out over 3 years. It wasn't a clerical error. It was structured theft. I did what any good employee would do. I took the ledger to the partners. My mother, Patricia, my sister, Ashley, my brother-in-law, Tyler. I thought they would be horrified. I thought they would call the police. I walked into the conference room and laid the evidence on the mahogany table. I expected gratitude. Instead, Tyler locked the door, Patricia didn't even look at the spreadsheet. She slid a different folder toward me. It contained a confession, pre-written, admitting that I had embezzled the money to fund an online gambling addiction. She told me I had two choices: sign the confession and resign quietly, and they wouldn't press charges, or refuse, and they would hand this manufactured evidence to the district attorney by noon. I tried to fight. I tried to argue logic, but they had been planning this for months. They had falsified login logs. They had planted digital footprints on my workstation. But the real kill shot wasn't the legal threat, it was the whisper campaign. Before I even left the building, Patricia was on the phone. She called every major firm in Phoenix. She didn't shout, she whispered. She told them I was unstable. She told them I was a liability. She told them she was heartbroken, but she had to let me go because of my issues. By the end of the week, my reputation was ash. My calls were blocked, my interviews were canceled, then my bank accounts were frozen due to suspicious activity flagged by the firm. My landlord evicted me 10 days later. I watched my life dismantled with the efficiency of a corporate liquidation. Agent James looked at me, his face unreadable. He asked why I didn't fight back. Why I didn't go to the police then. It is the question everyone asks. The victim. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you scream? I told him about the invisible chain. There is a concept in psychology called learned helplessness. If you tie a baby elephant to a stake with a rope, it will pull and pull until it realizes it isn't strong enough to break free. It gives up. When that elephant grows up, it becomes strong enough to snap that rope like thread, or even rip the stake out of the ground. But it doesn't try. Because it learned a long time ago that resistance is futile. Patricia raised me to be that elephant. For 37 years, she conditioned me to believe that I was lucky to be tolerated. She taught me that fighting back only resulted in more pain. She installed the buttons she was pressing. So when she destroyed my life, I didn't rage. I didn't sue. I froze. I accepted the premise that I must have messed up somehow. I sat in my car in the baking sun, starving, holding the keys to my own freedom, but unable to turn the ignition because I was waiting for permission to exist. I wasn't weak, Agent James. I was trained. Agent James opened his laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim interrogation room. We didn't just find the 1998 connection, Daphne, he said. We've been monitoring your family's communications for 6 months. We were waiting for them to lead us to the buyer. Instead, we heard them discussing you. He pressed play. The audio was crisp. It must have been recorded in the firm's boardroom. I could hear the faint hum of the HVAC system I knew so well. She found the ledger, Patricia. We have to act now. That was Tyler, my brother-in-law. His voice wasn't panicked. It was irritated, like he was discussing a late vendor payment. Then, my mother's voice cut through the static. It's unfortunate. Daphne is thorough. She won't stop digging. So what do we do? Ashley asked. If we fire her, she goes to the SEC. We don't just fire her, Patricia said. Her tone was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice she used when ordering catering for a shareholder meeting. We discredit the source, plant the gambling debts in her browser history, move the funds to an offshore account in her name. Make her toxic. If she has no credibility, she has no voice. Is that safe? Ashley asked. She's your daughter. She is a liability, Patricia corrected. If that 1998 file gets opened, we all go to prison for life. Destroying her career is a line item, Ashley. It's the cost of doing business. Do you want to go to jail? Or do you want to handle the problem? I listened to my own destruction being planned like a merger acquisition. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. For years, I had convinced myself that my mother was just strict, or disappointed, or emotionally unavailable. I thought she was broken. But listening to that tape, I realized she wasn't broken at all. She was functioning perfectly within her own twisted ecosystem. There is a concept called the trap of normalized cruelty. When you live in a toxic environment long enough, the abnormal becomes standard. Evil isn't a monster under the bed, it's the daily routine. My family hadn't snapped. They hadn't lost their minds in a fit of passion. They had simply normalized the idea that protecting their secret was more important than my life. To them, Framing me wasn't a sin. It was just logistics. It was a spreadsheet decision. I wasn't a person to be loved. I was an error to be corrected. They didn't hate you, James said, closing the laptop. That would almost be easier to accept, wouldn't it? But they didn't care enough to hate you. They just erased you, because you were in the way. I looked up at him. The tears were gone. My eyes felt dry and hot. What do you need me to do? James leaned forward. We need to know why the flag triggered now, Daphne. You've been off the grid for months. No credit cards, no phone. But 2 days ago, a ping went off in our system, from a pawn shop on the west side. What did you try to sell? I blinked, the memory of hunger sharp in my belly. My watch, I whispered. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I tried to pawn the vintage watch Uncle Michael gave me for my 10th birthday. The broker offered me $20, but he said he had to run the serial number first. I got scared he would call the police, so I ran. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of latex gloves. From an evidence bag, he produced the watch. It was a simple, battered timepiece with a leather strap. I had worn it every day since Michael died. It was the only thing I had left of him. This watch didn't trigger the system because it was stolen, James said. He turned the watch over and tapped the back casing. Michael didn't die in an accident. He was murdered because he stole the master encryption key for the defense network your mother was selling. We never found the key. The killers tore his house apart looking for it. James unscrewed the back of the watch. Inside, nestled behind the gears, was a tiny, high-tech chip that looked decades ahead of 1998. He hid it in the one place he knew they wouldn't look, James said. On the wrist of the niece he loved. You've been wearing the smoking gun for 27 years, Daphne. You've been starving in a parking lot, with the evidence that brings down the entire empire strapped to your arm. I stared at the watch. The ticking sound filled the room. All this time, while I was begging for scraps, while I was sleeping in fear, I held the power to destroy them. I just didn't know how to use it. I stood up. The trembling in my legs was gone. The forensic accountant was back online. You want to catch them? I said, my voice steady. But you can't just arrest them for the 1998 crimes yet. You need to link them to the current embezzlement to make it stick. You need them to confess to the frame-up. James nodded. We need a wire. I'll do it, I said. I know how to balance this ledger. I chose the location for its acoustics and its isolation. An abandoned subdivision project on the southern edge of the desert, where the skeleton of a skyscraper stood rusting against the sun. The heat was 105 degrees. It radiated off the concrete, distorting the air. I stood in the center of the unfinished lobby, wearing the wire taped to my chest. I wasn't sweating. I was calibrated. At 2 p.m., a black Mercedes SUV crunched over the gravel. My family stepped out. They looked ridiculous. Patricia was wearing Prada heels in the dust. Ashley was checking her phone, shielding the screen from the glare. Tyler looked bored, adjusting his tie like this was just another inconvenient client meeting. They weren't afraid. They were annoyed. They thought they were coming to buy my silence for $450,000 money they would likely steal back the moment I handed over the imaginary files. Patricia didn't hug me. She didn't ask where I had been sleeping for 6 months. She stopped 10 feet away, wrinkling her nose at the smell of the desert. You look terrible, she said. It was a statement of fact, not concern. Let's make this quick. We have a dinner reservation at 6. Do you have the money? I asked. My voice was steady. The microphone taped to my sternum felt hot. Tyler scoffed. He opened the back of the SUV and flashed a duffel bag. It's there. Cash. Unmarked. Just like you asked. Now give us the drive with Michael's old files. And then you disappear, Daphne. Permanently this time. I want to hear you say it, I said. I want to know why you did it, why you framed me for the embezzlement, why you destroyed my career. Ashley rolled her eyes. Oh my God, get over it. We needed a fall guy for the audit. You found the discrepancy. So you became the discrepancy. It was neat. It was tidy. It was necessary, Patricia cut in, her voice cold and flat. We couldn't have you digging into the firm's history. We couldn't risk you finding the connection to 1998. Destroying your credibility was a strategic imperative. You were collateral damage, Daphne. Stop acting like it was personal. Strategic imperative. That was the confession. Clear, recorded, admissible. So, the $450,000, I said. That was just overhead? That was the price of keeping our partners quiet, Tyler spat. Now give us the damn files. I reached into my pocket. They all tensed, expecting a flash drive, expecting the leverage they had come to destroy. Instead, I pulled out the watch. I held it up. The sunlight caught the cracked glass face. The leather strap dangled in the still air. I don't have a drive, I said. I have the time. Patricia froze. Her eyes locked onto the watch. I saw the color drain from her face, leaving her gray and aged beneath the makeup. She recognized it instantly. She knew exactly what was hidden inside that casing. She knew whose wrist it had been on 27 years ago. Where did you get that? She whispered. Uncle Michael gave it to me, I said, before you sold him out, before you let them plant the bomb. That's impossible, she stammered, taking a step back. They searched the house. They searched everything. They didn't search me, I said. Because I was invisible to you. I was just the disappointment. But I wasn't a failure, Mother. I was the vault. Tyler lunged forward. Give it to me. I didn't move. I didn't fail, I said, my voice echoing off the steel beams. I audited you. I dropped the watch into the dust. That was the signal. The air suddenly screamed. 2 black helicopters crested the top of the unfinished skyscraper, the wash of their rotors kicking up a blinding storm of sand and grit. Armored SUVs roared out from behind the concrete pillars, boxing in the Mercedes. Red laser sights danced across Tyler's chest. Federal agents, drop to your knees, now. Tyler hit the dirt, hands over his head, sobbing. Ashley screamed, cowering behind the car. But Patricia just stood there. She looked at the helicopters, then at the watch in the dust, and finally at me. Agent James stepped out of the lead vehicle, weapon drawn. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. I watched as they cuffed my mother. I watched as they shoved my sister into the back of a federal transport. I watched the empire crumble in less than 60 seconds. I stood in the swirling dust, feeling absolutely nothing but the heat of the sun on my face. The ledger was finally balanced. The collapse of the family empire wasn't loud, it was legal. In the weeks that followed, the federal government dismantled my mother's life with the same cold efficiency she had used to dismantle mine. Assets were frozen. Properties were seized. The firm was dissolved. Patricia, Ashley, and Tyler were denied bail, labeled as flight risks due to their offshore connections. They went from the country club to federal holding cells without passing go. Then came the wire transfer. $1.2 million. A combination of the federal whistleblower reward and the liquidation of the family estate for damages. I sat in my small rental apartment and stared at the number on the screen. It didn't look like lottery money. It looked like back pay for 27 years of silence. It looked like an apology from the universe. The FBI issued a public statement clearing my name. They didn't just exonerate me. They credited my forensic work as the catalyst for closing a major espionage case. The whisper campaign my mother had carefully constructed to destroy my reputation evaporated instantly. The firms that had blocked my calls were now leaving voicemails, begging for consultations. I didn't answer a single one. I wasn't interested in helping corporate giants save on their taxes anymore. I bought a building in downtown Phoenix. It wasn't a glass tower. It was a solid, brick structure with good bones. I put my name on the door. Not Dawson Family Holdings. Just Daphne Vance, Forensic Accounting. I stood in the center of the empty office, the smell of fresh paint filling the air. I didn't take the money and run to an island. I built something. There is a philosophy I've come to live by: the justice of the sower. Most people think revenge is about burning the enemy's field. It's about scorching the earth so nothing ever grows again. But that leaves you standing in ash too. That's the justice of the past. True justice, the kind that actually heals the wound, is about taking the resources from the corruption and using them to plant something new. You don't just stop the bad guys, You grow a forest that outlasts them. My mother used money to control and destroy. I am using her money to liberate. My firm specializes in one thing: financial abuse. I work with spouses who are being starved out by wealthy partners. I work with children whose inheritances were stolen by trustees. I use my skills to find the money hidden by narcissists and control freaks. I find the ledgers they think are buried. I give people back their keys. I walked over to the desk and picked up the only decoration in the room, the framed photo of Uncle Michael. He died protecting the truth. I live to expose it. I looked out the window at the Phoenix skyline. The heat was still blistering outside, shimmering off the pavement. But in here, the air was cool. It was quiet. It was mine. I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the scapegoat. I was the sower. And the harvest was just beginning.